These are the stones that I use mostly. They're not the only ones, but the DMT diamond sharpening stones. There's all different grits. I usually use the red, and the blue is coarser, so you could use the blue first, then the red, and then if you want to go crazy, you can get a finer one. But this is a good company. They got all different shapes of stones, different sizes, different prices. They're not cheap. But this number 600 red stone, the red one, is probably $45, $50. We got them at Amazon. So, but as I say, there's all different stones, water stones, oil stones. I just happen to like the diamonds because they seem to work a little faster. Okay, right, this is the first sanding with a block, and I'm using 80 yacht. Well, I sand all different ways to try to take any humps off, and then go back and forth with the grain. You know, if you had a palm sander on a bigger model, that'd be fine. I have a fest tool at home that I use, but I wouldn't use it on this. I probably have never, this is probably the smallest model I make for the Beetle Cat. As I said, this is 80 yacht. I'll probably go over it with 120, 180, and 280. I usually sand it 4 different grits. So usually 280 would be the finest. If it was going to be varnished, I might go a little finer. Usually if it's varnished, I don't particularly like this wood varnish, but it's all right. I've made a lot of models out of mahogany. And if I'm staining and varnishing mahogany, sometimes I leave all the dust on the model, the mahogany dust, and I wash it with acetone. And it makes a little stain. And that stain will get in sanding marks or scratches that I missed. So when it evaporates in about 30 seconds, you can redo it. I do that a lot on, hatches for boats. Sometimes I even take a little thin stain, very thin, with acetone, check it for any imperfections. All right, so I'm going to 120 grit now. And I haven't shaped the bow yet. That bow is not right. And I did a little chip here. And seeing as I'm painting this, I'll fill that with a little epoxy, and I usually use a West System product called 410. It's a powder, and I add that to epoxy resin, any amount I want, and it sands very nice. The tips of these boats break very easily, especially if it's pine. That's why when I rough cut it out, I leave quite a bit at the bow. I should have left more here. Leave a ½ inch. Then you can sand it off with a block and coarse paper very easily. Or maybe a small spoke shave.
Now, for people who are varnishing, if they break off the tip of their bow like that, would you recommend they add a little bit of stain to their epoxy to try to get it to disappear?
If they were using basswood, the 410 West System filler is just a powder. You can probably get it at any marine hardware store. It can be used to fill gouges on anything on any project. And it's almost the same color as this basswood.
And if they were using mahogany wood, would you recommend they add some mahogany stain to the epoxy?
Yeah, it gets a little tricky, but you can add a gel stain. We use WK, I think it is. I'll show you a can. And usually I mix the brown mahogany and the red mahogany. Okay. Okay, this is the stain we use. That's a brown mahogany, and this one is a red mahogany, and I mix them. If I want it more red, I put more red in or more brown. And you can mix this with a small amount of this to epoxy resins. And I don't know, it's a wood coat product, so I think you could probably find it on the internet. I don't do the internet, so I don't know one thing about that.
Yeah, they have a website.
I'll show you the filler if we have it here. Okay, this is West System. You can get it in a smaller container, I believe. Number 410. It's a very light color, almost the color of basswood.
Why don't you open it?
And it sands very nice when it dries. See,
Just add it a little bit at a time.
yeah, you can make it as thin as you want or as thick as you want. This is another powder that sands very nice, 407. It's kind of a reddish color, like micro balloons.
It's good for mahogany.
And you can mix the 410 and the 407 together. It doesn't matter. They're both easy sanding powders. We use them at the boat yard all the time for filling gouges and things like that. But with epoxy resins, most epoxies dry slow, so you got to let it dry overnight. I don't happen to use West System resin all the time. I use a product called MAS, But any of these epoxies, and you get different sizes, there's always a hardener and a resin. Any epoxy resin will work with West System powders. And there's a lot of different companies that have resins today. I just use this because it doesn't blush, which makes it, to me, harder to work with.
You have to rinse it with
But
water.
West System is a very good product. It's been around longer than any of them. So it's just what's available to you. And the pump handles work good. One squirt from this and one squirt from the hardener. If you have to do 3 or 4 in a big job, you can. The deeper you put it in a pot, it starts to make heat and it'll get very, very hot. So you can't even hold it. And if it's outside in the hot weather, it's possible it could go into flame. So you have to be careful. Okay. A little skeg for the Beetle Cat out of plywood, which you buy in a hobby store. It's nice little plywood. It comes in different thicknesses. This is 3/32. It's great for a centerboard, a rudder, or a skeg. I wouldn't use it for a big keel because I wouldn't, but it's great for a lot of things, and it's very sturdy. It doesn't warp like some of the other thin wood does. So I'm just going to glue this on. Hopefully this is with some super glue. I get this super glue at the hardware, at the hobby shop. And it's a Zap-A-Gap. It's fairly thick, dries fairly quick. They have a faster drying one, which is a red label, but it's thinner. And they also have a spray you can spray on the surface and put the glue on, and it'll dry super fast. I don't normally use it. I'm not putting a centerboard or a rudder on this boat. I usually hold it for about 1.5 minutes.
And once again, the wax paper. It's a good idea to have
wax
a roll
paper
of it.
or clean plastic. And you notice I have an old piece of wood here, but it's flat. You want a flat surface when you're gluing on a centerboard or a skeg or a keel. Okay, I think that's enough. You see it.